Good morning. Welcome back to my channel Literati. If you like the updates which I regularly post, then kindly like and subscribe to my channel. This channel Literati is a channel which I have created so that I can post my own interpretation and some original insights on the various popular topics of literature. Yesterday we had started discussing, or rather I had posted my views on the two most original characters which have been created by Charles Dickens in his penultimate novel, Great Expectations. And of course, Charles Dickens is known for his exceptional art of characterization. But in these two characters, Mr. Wemmick and Mr. Jaggers, I feel that he has done something unusual which is different from his usual way of characterizing people from real life, from the society which he knew and loved so well as criticized so vehemently, the Victorian age society and the social mores as well as the values of that age, and presented them through his satirical representations and through his creations of characters which remain in the public consciousness long after they have been created by the master storyteller Charles Dickens. We had discussed Mr. Jaggers, Mr. Wemmick and Mr. Jaggers to a certain extent. What I feel about these two characters is that lines by T. Sillett in his Hollow Men, that we were deliberate disguises, and these are disguises which we adopt for whatever reasons. In Wemmick's case, it is because he has such a rich inner life, and it is something which he holds very close to his heart. It is deeply personal. It is his private space. The boundaries in his mind are very clear. He is a very balanced person. The boundaries between the public space and the facade which he adopts when he is in the office, in the atmosphere of crime and criminals and convicts, and the inflexible attitudes or the morals and the system of crime and justice of the Victorian age society, and the warm and loving and imaginative and the extremely creative person he is, and a true friend, a devoted son, a very perfect host, and an extremely warm person, as side of his personality which he shows very rarely and only to those whom he trusts. Even Mr. Jaggers, who is his close associate with whom he is working throughout the week and they are in such close proximity, is unaware of this deeply private side of his life. And in fact, even when they come to know about this and they reveal a side of their mental space or their inner selves to each other, not deliberately but due to circumstances, they are embarrassed. So let us come back to the deliberate disguises which Mr. Jagger adopts. And as the story moves on, he finally reveals himself to be a man with such a strong sense of ethics and such enlightenment in his own way of looking at things, his sensitivity and his compassion, his understanding, which comes as a surprise and of which there is no hint in his everyday persona, and the formidable criminal lawyer who is inflexible, who has very clear definitions in his mind of crime and law, who is formidable, who inspires terror, and whose unquestionable authority is something which is the most obvious thing about him. Apart from that, he has these obsessive characteristics of washing his hands constantly with soap and water, which is a kind of a conscious or a subconscious way of somehow washing away what he deals with. And maybe this is the not only grime and dust, but the contamination which he feels because he is in close contact with the world of crime. As we know, Pip had met him long time back when he was just a boy of 12, and he was coming, Mr. Jaggers was coming down the stairs, the darkened staircase in the dark Statter's house, and he had just sort of bumped into him, and Mr. Jaggers had then made an impression on him because he looked so forbidding and he looked so stern. But apart from that, Pip had dismissed him, and he said, the famous last words you can say, in the book it says that he was nothing to me. Of course, later on, unexpectedly, something which Pip had never thought possible happened, and Mr. Jaggers becomes his legal guardian, carrying out the legacy which an unknown benefactor has bequeathed on Pip, making him a gentleman. And then in chapter, that was way back in the beginning of the book, in chapter 11, in chapter 18, he comes to the village, and Pip and Joe encounter him again. There he meets them. Before that, they see him demolishing Mr. Wopsley's futile arguments when the criminal case they are reading about in the newspaper is sort of, a given opinion which is pronounced by Mr. Wopsley about who the culprit is. And then at that moment also, Mr. Jaggers is unsparing and is very scathing in the way he talks to Wopsley and says that it is wrong to pronounce a judgment without a fair trial, because in the eyes of law, one is innocent till proven guilty. And then as the chapter moves on, he meets Pip, and Joe tells them about this the mission he's on, and that is to announce to Pip and Joe about this sudden inheritance, and the person who has given this to Pip wishes to remain unknown, and he is the client, or Mr. Jaggers is being authorized to carry out his will and his legacy for Pip. And even when he's pronouncing this unusual and unexpected news to Pip and an astounded Joe, he is very to the point. He is almost blunt. He is without any show of emotion. He talks about it in the strict legalese, in strict legal words. There's only one moment when he just says that if my wish had been asked, or if I had been asked, I would not be here. In other words, it is against his opinion that this scheme should be carried out, but of course he has to do what his client has authorized him to do, and so that is to ask Joe to release Pip from his apprenticeship, for Pip to come to London to live in style, to learn the mannerisms of high society, to become a gentleman, and to live the life of a gentleman. Of course, for Pip it is like a wish come true, and he cannot believe his luck. In fact, it seems like a dream fulfillment, a wish fulfillment, and this sudden good fortune, as he thinks it is again, it can be related by psychologists to Charles Dickens's own personal experience, when as a boy of 12, and he hated every single moment of it, he was suddenly thrust in the middle of street children working in a warehouse, and how often that sensitive child must have wished for some kind of fairy tale wish coming true, and which would rescue him from the sordid surroundings which he has suddenly found himself in. Now Pip, since that moment when he had met Estella, and Estella had humiliated him and called him a working class boy and mocked him and taunted him, ever since then this had created a feeling of dissatisfaction in Pip's mind, and that remains And now with the sudden change of fortune, he almost believes that it is Miss Havisham who had intended right from the very beginning that he should marry Estella, because from that moment he had been hopelessly infatuated with Estella, even in spite of knowing the fact that she thought that he was a nobody. He was nothing, and he did not belong to her social status, and she had this extreme arrogance about her position, about money and the wealth which she was privileged to live in. And later on, of course, we understand how hollow her arrogance and her pride proved to be, and what were her origins, which was something which nobody would have imagined possible, and which again proves that pride, arrogance, wealth, power, these are not the real qualities which give any happiness or add any value to one's life, or they cannot give you peace and satisfaction. Other things are much more important. So coming back to Mr. Wopsle, Mr. Jaggers, and we see him in action in chapter 18 when Pip comes to London to begin his life. In chapter 20, he comes to Mr. Jaggers' office. He sees the way Mr. Jaggers deals summarily with all the clients who are of course all his clients are criminals and thieves, and those who are accused, and the convicts, those who are the marginalized, and those who are on the other side of the law. And as Pip watches him, he sees how they are afraid of him, how they hang on to his every word, how he deals with them, dismisses them. There's no show of emotion. And inside the office, the plaster casts of the two criminals who have been tried and who have been executed, all these create an atmosphere which is full of this sense of the presence of crime and law and justice, however you define justice, because when Pip goes out waiting for Mr. Jaggers, he just walks out to take a look at the surroundings, and Newgate prison is just opposite, and he meets one of the members of the law courts, who is obviously one of the men who are employed or who are working there, but who simply seem to have a kind of lack of any emotion about the things which go on there, the convicts, the way they are hung, and how he tells Pip that and one day there were 6 in a row who were hung together. This speaks a lot about the almost inhuman and the inflexible system which was in place at that time, and of which Charles Dickens was such a great critic, and which he satirizes in Great Expectations in particular. Mr. Jaggers is obviously an authority on law, and he has a formidable reputation. He is one of the leading practitioners of law. He has a presence which inspires a feeling of awe in all those who come in contact with him, and Pip is no exception. Mr. Jaggers does not allow anyone to take any liberties with him. He is always straight and to the point, and he does not have any time for conversation or any personal remarks or any observation, or he simply does not reveal of his own thoughts or his own feelings of his own mind, accepting the fact that he is a lawyer and his job is to bring justice and bring the crime to its logical conclusion, to create a system or to uphold the system. But is that really true? Does Mr. Jaggers, though being a lawyer, does he think that the system of law as it is practiced in that age is really moral? Does it have true ethical values? is it what we consider the truth or the right thing to do? Because Victorian age society had put a lot of stress about or on propriety, or what is right, what was correct, what was proper, what was respectable. So these were the things which were emphasized in the Victorian age society, and especially the middle classes who were the upholders of these moral values. In fact, the novels were also supposed to uphold these values and to create a world which would be a world of the pictures of domesticity and happy family life and the kind of ethos which they wish to promote. And Queen Victoria on the throne with her growing family, with her Prince Consort, Prince Albert, and that again that image of happy family life was something which everyone should aspire to. But of course, Charles Dickens has created this world in Great Expectations in particular, where all these ethical values are questioned. He is a critic of the age in other novels also, but in Great Expectations, his criticism or his satirization of these things which are considered important, or these impulses which promote people, a society which has very strong and a very stable system, happy family life, a system of justice which again puts things in a very proper place, the things which are important for happiness, the lust for money and the greed for power, the human aspirations, we can call them. Are these the ultimate things in life? So these are questioned, and the complexities in both, or the layers in both the characters of Mr. Wemmick and Mr. Jaggers put these questions again in a very correct perspective, because we admire Wemmick for being one of the most we can say wholesome people. He has such a harmonious personality. He is a very balanced person. His love for his father, his devotion to him, his pride in his own hobbies, his home, which is a place where he relaxes, and the clear boundaries which he has set up in his mind. These all create, or this make Mr. Wemmick a person whom we can look back at when we read the Great Expectations as someone who lightens up the atmosphere of the book, because the book is a very book which has very deeply moral and very disturbing questions. Now, it was a custom for Mr. Jaggers to invite the new students at Mr. Pocket's home, where the establishment where Pip, along with other young gentlemen, went to get his education, or education in the way which was a desultory education, which would not really equip them to make a living, but at least it would show them what being a gentleman meant. So it was a custom for Mr. Jaggers to invite all these young men to his home for dinner, and Mr. Wemmick had told Pip, because Wemmick, after inviting Pip to his home the first time, gradually warms up to Pip, and Pip also starts understanding him. And once, when he had said that he does not really understand Mr. Jaggers, because we had gone to get his allowance in chapter 24, and Wemmick had laughingly said that he would take it as a compliment. And Wemmick also, he, in the presence of Pip, he unwinds, and he does not adopt that total shutdown expression in front of Pip, because Pip has seen that other warm side of his persona, and now they are good friends. He also points out to the plaster cards of the criminals in Mr. Jaggers' office, and laughingly he has said he has given them names, and he, in almost a very light-hearted manner, he tells Pip what their crimes were and how they were accused and what and how they were executed. To Pip, it is rather horrifying. For Wemmick, because he has learned to put things in a proper perspective, he can take it lightly, but of course for Pip it is a horrifying matter, and he cannot understand the casual way in which Wemmick can describe them. And then Wemmick also takes him to the police courts, and he says that would you like to see how Mr. Jaggers deals with the lawyers or the officers of the police courts, those representatives of the justice system, and you can see how his manners and his way of questioning, his way of pronouncing a fact is something which is so forceful, and it is so unquestionable, and it is so authoritative that everyone is afraid of him. And Pip actually goes there and he sees the way Mr. Jaggers points his finger at those who are accused, how he tells them, how he manages to wring out the confession from them. But what is surprising to Pip, that he sees that Mr. Jaggers, when he is dealing with the judges and those representatives of the legal system, he is equally unscathing, and he's equally forceful, he's equally critical. And watching him dealing not only with the accused, those miserable convicts who have been brought there for trial, but even those solemn looking officers, the judges, those venerable people who have the authority of the law behind them, Pip understands for the first time that there is a quality of complexity in Mr. Jaggers' attitude towards law, towards authority, towards those who are accused, those who are considered criminals. And actually he does not have a very unequivocal belief in the justice system. And this is something which Pip finds like a revelation in Mr. Jaggers' manner, because being a criminal lawyer, he was supposed to be to have this firm definition of what a crime was, who the criminals were, and what the justice system should be like. This makes Pip wonder if there is something else behind Mr. Jaggers' blunt, brusque, and his manner, which is so firm and so decisive and so uncompromising when he is dealing with the crime and criminals.